Imagine this. It's 40 degrees F. Your phone shuts off. Your breath freezes in midair. You re-wearing a $300 modern winter jacket rated for extreme cold. Yet within minutes, you re-shivering, sweating, and losing heat. Now rewind 700 years. A medieval hunter stands in the same cold. No electricity, no Gore-Tex, no heating pads, and yes, comfortable. Not lucky, not stronger, just dress smarter. So how did medieval clothing systems beat modern winter tech in the most brutal cold on Earth? And why does your expensive jacket actually make things worse? Stay with me, this will change how you dress for winter forever. Most people today think of clothing as individual items. A jacket, a hoodie, a thermal shirt, something you put on and forget. Medieval people never thought that way because if they did, they wouldn't have survived winter. For them, clothing wasn't fashion or comfort. It was a system, built to keep a human body alive in conditions that could kill within hours. At 40 degrees F, the enemy isn't just cold. It's heat loss from every direction. Medieval people understood this instinctively. They didn't rely on one thick coat and hope for the best. Instead, they built protection from the skin outward, layer by layer, covering the body completely so heat had nowhere to escape. Every piece worked with the others, not alone. The first layer was about moisture control, not warmth. Linen or thin wool worn against the skin absorbed sweat and allowed it to move away from the body. This was critical. Sweat is dangerous in extreme cold. Once it cools, it turns into ice and drains body heat fast. Medieval clothing systems expected physical labor, walking, chopping wood, riding, hunting, and planned for sweat instead of pretending it wouldn't happen. Next came insulating layers. Usually wool. Not one, but several. Wool traps air between its fibers, and air is what actually holds warmth. More layers meant more trapped air, and more trapped air meant better insulation. If the weather worsened, another layer went on. If activity increased, one came off. The system was flexible, not fixed. The outer layer existed for one main reason: to stop wind. Wind strips heat faster than almost anything else. Medieval outer garments, cloaks, long coats, fur-lined overcoats were designed to break airflow completely. They overlapped in front, tied or belted at the waist, and extended far below the hips. There were no open hems or exposed gaps. The body was sealed like a shelter. Coverage mattered just as much as thickness. Medieval people protected the neck, wrists, ankles, and legs because those areas lose heat rapidly. Long coats warmed the thighs. Hoods shielded the head and neck. Mittens kept fingers together instead of separating them like modern gloves. Boots are layered with wool, felt, or fur to block frozen ground from stealing warmth. Modern jackets fail not because they are poorly made, but because they are only one part of a system, treated as the whole solution. Medieval modern winter clothing is often marketed as a shortcut. One jacket, one price tag, one solution. Medieval people never believed in shortcuts because winter punished every mistake. Their biggest advantage wasn't strength or toughness, it was understanding how layering actually works in extreme cold. And this is exactly where many modern jackets quietly fail. Layering in medieval times wasn't about piling on random clothes. Each layer had a specific job, and together they solved a problem modern outerwear still struggles with: controlling heat and moisture at the same time. At 40 degrees F, warmth alone isn't enough. If your body gets wet inside your clothes, you lose heat faster than the cold air can steal it. The innermost layer existed to protect the skin from sweat. Medieval workers, hunters, and travelers moved constantly. They expected to sweat. Thin linen or fine wool worn next to the body absorbed moisture and allowed it to spread out and evaporate instead of pooling. This kept the skin dry and prevented the deadly freeze that happens when sweat cools in cold air. Modern jackets often ignore this step, relying on breathable membranes while people wear cotton or pour. The biggest lie modern winter clothing tells is that technology replaces nature. Shiny labels promise thermal ratings, synthetic insulation, and advanced breathability. Yet in real survival conditions, medieval materials often outperform modern ones for one simple reason: they manage moisture without collapsing. At extreme cold, moisture is the real killer. When your body works, it sweats even in freezing temperatures. Modern synthetic jackets trap that moisture inside. Once insulation becomes damp, it compresses, loses loft, and stops trapping air. At that point, your expensive jacket becomes a cold shell wrapped around a warm body that's rapidly cooling itself from the inside. Medieval materials were chosen because they failed safely. Wool didn't stop working when wet adapted. Wool fibers can absorb large amounts of moisture while still trapping heat. Even when damp, wool continues to insulate because its structure keeps air pockets intact. This meant medieval workers could sweat, stop moving, and still remain warm instead of freezing. Fur pushed this advantage even further. Animal fur traps air at multiple levels: between hairs, within the hairs, and between the garment and the body. This creates a natural insulation system that doesn't collapse under moisture the way synthetic fills do. Fur also excels at shedding frost. Ice forms on the outer tips of the fur and can be shaken off before it ever reaches the skin. That's why even modern polar parkas still use fur-lined hoods. No fabric has beaten that design yet. Leather and hide served another critical function modern jackets struggle with: wind control without suffocation. Leather blocks wind almost completely while still allowing some moisture to escape. Medieval outer layers weren't airtight. They were breathable enough to prevent condensation while stopping icy air from stripping heat away. Modern waterproof shells, by contrast, often trap vapor inside unless actively vented, leading to internal frost buildup. Synthetic insulation shines in controlled conditions, but survival doesn't happen in labs. Once wet, down collapses. Once compressed, synthetic fill loses efficiency. Medieval clothing systems expected rain, snow, sweat, and long exposure, and were built around materials that stayed. One of the most overlooked reasons medieval clothing worked so well in extreme cold is how completely it covered the human body. Medieval people didn't think in terms of upper wear and lower wear. They understood that the body loses heat as a whole system, and if even one section is exposed or underprotected, the entire system starts to fail. Medieval coats were long for a reason. They didn't stop at the waist like most modern jackets. They extended to the knees or below, protecting the thighs, hips, and upper legs, areas packed with large muscles and major blood vessels. When these areas get cold, the body reacts by pulling heat away from the extremities to protect the core, making hands and feet freeze faster. By keeping the legs warm, medieval clothing reduced this heat loss chain reaction before it even began. Modern parkas often leave a dangerous gap at the waist. Cold air slips upward, warm air escapes downward, and every step pumps heat out like a bellows. Medieval garments eliminated this problem through overlapping construction. Coats wrapped across the body instead of zipping straight up the center. Belts and ties pulled layers snug, locking heat inside and stopping wind from driving straight through the torso. There were no exposed seams acting like cold highways. The neck was treated as a critical weak point. Medieval people knew that heat escapes rapidly through the neck and shoulders, especially in wind. That's why hoods, high collars, scarves, and fur trims was standard. These weren't decorative. They created a sealed transition between head and body, preventing warm air from pumping out every time you moved. Many modern jackets fail here with shallow hoods, loose collars, or gaps that allow wind to tunnel straight down the spine. Hands and wrists were also protected as a system. Medieval mittens often extended past the wrist and overlapped sleeves, preventing exposed skin during movement. Modern gloves frequently stop short, leaving a small but deadly gap that bleeds heat continuously. Medieval designs prioritized continuous coverage, not convenience. Feet were treated with the same seriousness. Medieval footwear wasn't just boots, it was layered insulation. Wool socks, felt inserts, fur linings, and thick soles worked together to isolate the foot from frozen ground. Modern boots often focus on waterproofing while neglecting insulation volume, circulation space, or internal layering. Tight boots cut blood flow, turning feet into ice blocks no matter how advanced the materials claim to be. The key difference is philosophy. Medieval clothing assumed constant exposure, long durations, and no rescue. Every inch of the body mattered. Modern winter wear often assumes short exposure and quick shelter. At 40 degrees F, that assumption is deadly. Medieval systems didn't leave gaps, and that's why they worked. The real power of medieval winter clothing isn't locked in the past, it's immediately usable today if you know what to take from it. You don't need fur cloaks or iron belts to survive extreme cold. But you do need to think the way medieval people did. In systems, not single solutions. The first lesson is to dress for sweat, not temperature. Medieval people expected hard work in winter. They dressed knowing they would heat up, slow down, stop, and then freeze if moisture wasn't managed. That's why their base layers focused on absorbing and spreading sweat rather than sealing it in. Modern survivalists should do the same by using moisture-wicking base layers and avoiding cotton completely. Staying dry inside your clothing is more important than piling on insulation. The second lesson is seal the body like shelter, not like fashion. Medieval coats overlapped, tied, wrapped, and belted for a reason. Heat leaks through gaps long before insulation fails. Today, that means tightening cuffs, using jackets that extend below the waist, wearing bib-style insulated pants, sealing the neck with a gaiter or scarf, and making sure gloves overlap sleeves. Cold air always looks for an opening, and medieval systems left none. The third lesson is to protect the legs and feet as aggressively as the torso. Medieval people understood that frozen legs drain the body's heat faster than almost anything else. Long coats, layered trousers, felt boots, and fur-lined footwear weren't optional, they were essential. Modern jackets fail when paired with thin pants and casual boots. Insulated pants, wool socks, roomy boots, and foot insulation are not accessories. They are survival tools. Another critical takeaway is adjustability. Medieval clothing systems could be loosened, tightened, added to, or stripped down depending on activity. Cloaks could be thrown off during labor and wrapped back on when resting. Belts cinched insulation in place. Modern survival clothing should be just as adaptable. Zippers, vents, removable layers, and modular systems are valuable only if you actually use them. If you sweat and don't vent, your clothing becomes your enemy. Finally, medieval survival teaches a mindset modern people often forget. Respect the environment. They didn't trust ratings, labels, or guarantees. They trusted observation, how the wind felt, how moisture behaved, how fast heat escaped. They listened to their bodies. Cold was not something to conquer. It was something to work with. Your $300 jacket isn't useless, but it's incomplete when you combine modern materials with medieval logic layering, sealing, full coverage, and moisture control. You stop fighting winter and start surviving it. If this changed how you think about winter survival, subscribe, because modern problems often have medieval solutions.